Hi, welcome to part 10 of Addiction 101 for Family Members. I'm Tom Harrison, author of The Complete Family Guide to Addiction. In our last segment, we talked about detox and rehab, they're places where people go in order to get addiction treatment. Today, we're going to talk about what those treatments are. Now, again, very important, these treatments are not cures. They don't cure addiction. They're just strategies that addicts can use in order to not use long enough that the brain can start to heal itself. And there are three basic types of treatments. And these are available in rehabs, but also not in rehabs. They are psychotherapy, medical drugs, and support groups. Most people are pretty familiar with the concept of psychotherapy. The basic idea is the brain can heal itself, the brain can help itself. Addiction is a brain disease, and as a result, the brain is telling the addict to do things that are self-destructive. And the goal of psychotherapy here is to enable the addict, when their brain is telling them to do things that are self-destructive, to understand what's happening and to resist what the brain is telling them. There are two types of psychotherapy. There's traditional psychotherapy, which derives ultimately from Freud. The basic idea is that we don't always understand everything that's happening in our brain because part of our brain is unconscious. And so therapy is designed to make the unconscious conscious. The idea is that if you have a destructive behavior, it's a symptom of a deeper underlying problem, and the goal of therapy is to bring that problem into consciousness so that we have more control over our decision making. A more contemporary type of therapy is behavioral psychotherapy, and there are many types of behavioral psychotherapy. But one thing they tend to have in common is the belief that the symptom is not so, or the behavior is not so much the symptom of an underlying problem, so much as that the behavior is the problem. It's a more straightforward approach where we say, here's a behavior, that's a problem. What can we do here and now as a strategy to stop that behavior? Eliminate the behavior, you eliminate the problem. There are two different approaches. They both can be very effective. They both can work great. But it's good to know which approach you're getting into. Most therapists will do one or the other. They don't tend to cross over very much. You may find that one works better than another. If one doesn't work well, you might try the other. And again, there are many behavioral psychotherapies that you can try as well. The second type of treatment is medical drugs. Again, these drugs are not cures. They're just things that help you to not use. We have drugs that are approved for two types of addictions, alcohol and opioids. If your loved one is addicted to something else, say cocaine, for instance, then they may not be as helpful. With alcohol, there are three approved drugs. There is what's called antabuse. Antabuse will make you extremely sick if you have any alcohol at all. So if an alcoholic is taking antabuse, they won't drink because it will make them extremely sick. The problem with antabuse is that alcoholics have a very strong tendency to stop using it because they want to drink. So it works great as long as the alcoholic's actually using it. Another drug is naltrexone. Naltrexone will allow you to drink. It won't make you sick, but it will take away the effects of alcohol. You won't get the high from alcohol. So again, it can work. It can be helpful as long as the alcoholic actually keeps using it. That's the drawback. And then a third drug is called Campril, which is designed to alleviate a lot of the cravings and withdrawal symptoms that alcoholics experience. With opioids, naltrexone is sometimes used as well. It has a similar effect. There are other drugs that are designed to replace the craving, the effect of an opioid drug, but without the cognitive and behavioral problems that are caused by an opioid such as heroin. The best known of those is methadone. It's an older drug. It's a controlled substance. Typically, you have to get it at a clinic, often every day. It can be inconvenient, but it can be effective. A more modern drug is Suboxone, which typically you can take at home. You don't have to go to a clinic. You have to keep doing it, and it can be hard to withdraw from it. But many people have had very good results using Suboxone. The third type of treatment is support groups. These are groups that addicts join where they support each other, they share stories, they share strategies, they help each other out in all sorts of ways. And the most well-known type of support group is what's called a 12-step group, such as Alcoholics Anonymous, although there's also Narcotics Anonymous and many other anonymous groups. They're called 12-step groups because people typically work through 12 steps. The first step, most famously, is acknowledging powerlessness over the substance. And then following that, accepting a higher power, and there are many other steps. 12-step groups have a great track record. They've saved thousands of lives. They can be wonderful. A lot of people swear by them. They don't work for everybody. Some people don't like them. One reason some people don't like them is they feel they're too religious. And 12-step groups are not a religion, but in their early days, they were influenced by certain religious ideas. It's important to remember, too, that 12-step groups are very decentralized. So there are some groups that are very religious and some that are not religious at all, and some that are in the middle. And you can try out different groups if you think one is too religious or not religious enough or whatever. There are also non-12-step support groups. The most famous of these is Smart Recovery, which is built on more on behavioral psychology than on the 12-step program. The only disadvantage to the non-12-step groups is there just aren't as many of them, so it can be harder to find a meeting to go to. Although, increasingly, a lot of both 12-step and non-12-step groups are moving online. Now, an online meeting may not have all of the benefits of an in-person meeting, but on the other hand, it's a lot more accessible. So that's a very brief overview of the three types of treatment for addiction. Typically, when people go to rehab, they get exposed to all three, and maybe different variations on all three. Because the truth is, it's basically virtually impossible to know what type of treatment will help a given person. Some people find Alcoholics Anonymous is great. Some people find that Suboxone is great. Some people find that cognitive behavioral therapy is wonderful. But it's almost impossible to know in advance what type of treatment will help a specific person. So for that reason, the approach tends to be try everything, see what works. So that's a basic introduction to the three types of treatment that you'll find in rehab or outside of rehab. So we've talked about rehab, we've talked about treatments. So you've gotten a little idea of what it's like for typically addicts in early recovery. What we haven't talked about, though, is what it's like for family members in early recovery. Because remember, addiction is a family disease. It's not just the addict who gets sick, it's the family that gets sick. And it's not just the addict who needs to go through recovery, it's the family that needs to go through recovery as well. So in our next segment, we're going to talk about early recovery and what it's like for family members and how family members can help themselves during that period and also help their loved one and prevent and avoid relapse. So I hope you'll join me for that. Thank you.